Hi, my name is Henry Nacino, and I am a customer engineer on the Google Cloud Platform team. So today's topic is using IAM, or Identity and Access Management, roles with Google Cloud Storage. So the scenario I'm going to talk about is pretty simple and it seems pretty intuitive, but there's some things that you just need to understand as you're setting up IAM roles, specifically in this case that I'm going to cover is with GCS buckets. So in this case, I have two different groups. I have a students group and a teachers group, and I have two buckets, an HJN students bucket and an HJN teachers bucket. Intuitively, I want to allow the students to access only the students bucket and the teachers to only be allowed to access the teachers bucket. So to do that in IAM is relatively simple. So let me show you what I have set up, and then we'll kind of talk through this. So if I go in the admin console, you see my two groups. I have a students group, and if I look at the members, I have one member called James. Likewise, if I go into the teachers group, I have one member, Christy. All right, so that's my group set up. Now, if I go into my GCP project, I have my students bucket and my teachers bucket, and at this point, I haven't assigned any roles to those two groups, students or teachers. So if I log in this case, in this browser, I'm logged in as James, who's a student, and I try to access the students bucket, I will get an access denied. And if I try to access the teachers bucket from the James account, I will also get an access denied. Same thing from here, logged in as Christy, who's a teacher. Trying to access the students bucket. Access denied. Try to access the teachers bucket. Access denied. So everything is working as expected. And now I want to go ahead and assign the students group the viewer role to be able to view objects in the students bucket. So go into the students bucket, go into permissions, add members. I'm going to add the students group. The storage object viewer role is now assigned to the students group. And we click add. All right. And now we do the same for the teachers. We're going to add the teachers group. The object viewer role is now assigned to the teachers group. Okay. So at this point, now we should have our roles assigned correctly. So we go in here again, logged in as James. And if James tries to access the teachers bucket, still should get an access denied. But if James tries to access the students bucket, we should be able to view the contents of that bucket. And there we see the students.txt file. And same thing now, logged in as Christy, who's a teacher. So try to access the teachers bucket. We should see the text file for teachers. But if we try to access the students bucket, we should get the access denied message. Okay, so again, that's working as expected. Where things kind of maybe not work as you would expect is, so I was using the gsutil command to basically access a specific bucket. But if I wanted to use the UI, what you see up here, notice if I try to select, so the project that these buckets are in is HJN dev project. So here, logged in again as James, if I try to select that project, and I'll just do a search for HJN, and basically you can't find that project. So this user doesn't have any project level rights or access rights to be able to view that project inside the UI. But what I can do, because I have access to the specific bucket, is if I just know the name of the bucket and the name of the project, I can actually take that URL, which, and I'll just paste it in here. So in this case, I have the name of the bucket and the project. So if I go ahead and hit that, notice now I can access that particular bucket, the HCN students bucket. Again, I am logged in under James, so I do have the right access to it. So even though I can't select that project, I do have the access to that particular bucket. So I can access it through the UI, but through the URL. I can't navigate it through the navigation menus. Likewise, for if I go into this browser, which I'm logged in as Christy, if I try to access it through the URL, remember Christy is a teacher, so I shouldn't be able to access it here. See, okay. So again, I don't have access to be able to view this bucket. But Christy is a teacher, so there I can see the teacher's bucket using the UI, but I do need to know the URL. I can't navigate through it because I can't actually select that project. Okay, so that's the first part of it. So now you may be asking, what if, and let me go back, what if you want to be able to, your users to be able to access the bucket or access that project, be able to select that project through the UI. So the role that you would assign to this user or to this group is the project browser role, IAM role. So if I assign that to both of these groups, then the user could select that project. So let's see how far that takes us. So let me go ahead and now go into IAM. And now I am going to add, and I'm going to add again the students. And the role I'm going to add is project browser. I'm going to save that. And you should see that in here. So that's our students. And I'm going to do the same thing for teachers. So project browser, save, and we see our teachers over here as well. So both students group and teachers group have project browser role assigned to them. So now if I go in to, again, I'm logged in as James here, who's a student. If I go ahead and try to select a project, now if I go in all, notice now that project shows up. So I can actually select a project. Okay, so notice now, though, I have this, you don't have permission to view the storage browser. So although I can select the project, there's really nothing. I can go to try a compute engine, don't have permission. I can go to storage, don't have permissions, but as I did before, I can still go directly using the URL. I can access that bucket through the direct URL. But now I can actually select the project. So, and the same thing if I'm logged in as the teacher, Christy in this case, try to select a project. So now the dev project shows up. I can select it, but I can't do a list of buckets. That's why this is getting an error right here. Same thing if I try to access compute engine, don't have access to that. And again, try to go back and access my storage, and I can't access it here. But again, as I mentioned earlier, if I know the URL, in this case, teachers, actually, let's go ahead and try to access students from the URL. Even though we're a teacher, we should get another failed. So now to the teachers bucket, and we should be able to see it again. All right, so now we give the browser access or project browser role assigned to these two groups. They can select the project, but they can't navigate the menus in the UI, so they still need a direct URL. So let's go back and kind of recap now the next challenge. So we got by this. We added the project browser role to both users, both groups, and now we need access to the storage browser UI. So I want to be able to navigate the UI and get to the bucket using the storage, using the navigation menus to go to storage and browser. So to do this, the permission that I need is bucket list. So I need to be able to list all the buckets. So I'm going to be able to give that. I'm going to create a custom role that just has the bucket list permission, and then I'm going to assign that role to both the students and the teachers. So now, if we go here and go to roles, I have created this custom role for listing buckets. And if I go into it, you're going to see it has only one permission, which is the storage buckets list. So it'll now list the buckets on the storage UI. So what I need to do now is assign that role to both the students and the teachers. So I am going to add another role to the students, and the role is the custom role, and custom role, and that's the storage role for listing buckets. Save. And we're going to do the same for the teachers. My custom role for listing buckets. Save. All right. Now we have students and teachers can now list the buckets in that project. So now, if I go into, again, here I am James. So now let me go try to navigate. So I still can't get to some of the other menu items, can't get to Compute Engine. But now if I try to go to storage and the storage browser, maybe I have to refresh. Okay, so now if I get to the storage browser, you can see that I can list, or James can list, the students and the teachers. But remember, James is a student, so shouldn't be able to access the teachers bucket. So let me go into students first. Should be able to access that. Go into teachers, and can't see anything in the teachers bucket. All right, so that's working as expected. Same thing if I go into Christy. So Christy, if we go into bucket details, so I need to refresh this. So now Christy can get the list of all the buckets in the project, and Christy's a teacher, so shouldn't be able to see the contents of the students bucket, but going to the teachers bucket, should be able to see them there. All right. So now everything's working as planned. So really, it's a pretty simple scenario. Really, we just had two groups, students group, teachers group. Students only access the students bucket, teachers only allowed to access the teachers bucket. But to navigate through the UI, you have to do a few other steps. Give them access to the project through the project browser, IAM role. Then if you want them to navigate through the bucket list or the storage browser UI, then you hit give them the permission to actually list the buckets. So that concludes today's talk. Thank you and hope to see you again.